Hi, how are you, Dr. Randall? Thank you for having me on. Mm, mm. Yeah, absolutely. No, they're just in different areas, to make me well-rounded in the things that I teach. There's one in meditation, there's one in substance abuse counseling, there's one in divorce counseling, life coaching, relationship coaching, so on and so forth. So I work on four or five overarching areas, like dating and relationships would be an overarching area. Depression and anxiety would be an overarching area. But then, of course, within each one of those buckets, there are so many different nuances that, a person could need. And you work with 20 different modalities plus all of your Western medicine education and techniques. So, we can try always to categorize our work in a way that is easily intelligible and explicable. But anybody who works in the mental health field, they have to be well versed in a pretty broad range, even if they're very niche practitioners. Even within a certain niche, you have to know a lot of stuff because every person that you meet has such a different story. And the fascinating thing is that even though every person's circumstances are so different and it really requires you as the practitioner to have a lot of education on a broad number of topics, the patterns that you start to see emerging are very similar across the board of human experience and the things that we want and the things that we love and the things that work and don't work. You start to see a lot of similarities across ages, cultures, race, religion, and a broad spectrum of problems. So it's never a boring day in our work, Dr. Randall. Mm. Yeah, yeah, and the challenge is the most challenging cases are when they are outside the lines. Like, you're thinking to yourself, "Okay, I have this method or I have this modality, and it usually works for, you know, 96% of my clients." But then this is just not working for this one person, and then you are really challenged to come up with a different action plan of, how you're gonna help that person. And that's where the real, you know, uh, that's sort of when our back is up against the wall and we're being given a run for our money, so to speak. Mm, 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 yes. I technically had a year in between, but I studied at USC for 7.5 years. So, yeah, I've given that school a lot of love, time, effort, and money. Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Well, I did have some mentors, and I had a therapist, named Lisa for 7 years, and I had, some, great friends and some coaches. I definitely had people in my corner, but, I would say that the majority of the sort of transformation that I did was by myself. Um, Absolutely. So, I mean, my first step was learning what it meant to take responsibility. When I was 24, when I was 24, it was the first time in my life I had ever heard the term personal responsibility. Um, it was the term, the first time I had ever Googled or heard the phrase, radical accountability or radical ownership over your life. I didn't learn that until I was done with college. And so that concept completely changed my life. I learned it from a guy named Mark who used to go to my gym. He ended up becoming a mentor to me. He taught me what this meant, and it was very confusing for me at first because it felt like I was being blamed. It felt like I was being told that, everything that had happened in my life, my anorexia and my depression and my, suicidal ideation and all of this kind of stuff and this disease that I didn't ask for, that these things were somehow my fault. And it wasn't until later, now this is something that I teach, that I understood the nuance that personal responsibility is not about fault, blame, or shame. It really doesn't matter whose fault it was. Sometimes things are our fault when we make stupid mistakes, but sometimes bad things happen to innocent people and it's not your fault. And it's not about blaming yourself for it or blaming God or blaming anybody else. The question is, given that this has happened, regardless of whose fault it was, you know, you are the only one who is going to be able to clean up that mess. Um, and although I had many people in my corner while I was in the process of my transformation, Mark was the only person who ever told me that. He was the only person who ever told me, "This is on you. You gotta put on your big boy pants now, and, it's gonna be really hard, but you have to rebuild now." Nobody else told me that. I don't know if they were afraid they'd hurt my feelings or if it's just kind of an insensitive thing to say to a person who's suffering, but it was the greatest gift. Now, maybe they didn't know, sure. That was the first thing I wasn't told. Um, the second thing I wasn't told is why I prefaced this by saying that most of this transformation I did on my own. The second thing I was not told is what to do about my problems. Everybody helped me understand how I got my problems and helped me cultivate a very sophisticated understanding of why I am the way I am, how I got to be here, my childhood traumas, how it all played into my gut, why I ended up with a stomach disease. Sure. I'll tell you in 1 second. Um, but just to finish the point, the thing that people didn't tell me was, okay, we understand all your problems. Now, what are we going to do about them? Exactly. And therapists, coaches, right, right. And a big gripe that I had was that therapists, coaches, doctors, all the smartest people that I went to, when it came time to that question, okay, what's the action plan? Then people got really cagey about answering that question because if they tell you what to do, then they're assuming responsibility on some level for it working. And that's a liability that a lot of people don't want to have on their shoulders. So when I decided to become a coach, my focus was, my experience has been that they won't unless you give it to them directly. Not well, what I mean to say, no, of course. Well, let me explain my perspective. My perspective is that my job is never to tell somebody what to do with their lives because I'm not their parent or their dad or whatever. And you can bring a horse to water, you cannot force it to drink. And you're very correct that you can't spoon feed somebody an action plan. But somebody comes to you seeking advice and they are paying you for that advice and you have been through what they've been through and you know what worked for you and what didn't and you know what works for most clients and what doesn't, right? Obviously every situation is different. Then the way that I see it, it is incumbent upon you to give them direct feedback and advice. And of course you can't shove it down their throat and you can't force them to do it. And the best thing you can do is say, hey, here are examples for you to understand. Let's help you figure out what works best for you. But if you sit there, yeah, I think we're, not disagreeing so much. But I think that if you're sitting there and you're saying, well, I'm not sure what would work for you. Or, well, what do you think you should do? It's like when you go to a doctor and, you know, you have an ailment and they say, okay, well, here's 7 different medications you should do. Well, doctor, what do you think I should take? Well, it's really up to you. It's like, well, no shit, Sherlock. It's up to me, excuse my language, but You're the expert here, right? That's why I'm paying the doctor. So the doctor's job isn't to force a medication down my throat, God forbid, but, he's the one with the experience. So that's or she, of course, sorry. Um, so that's what I was missing, and that's what I always wanted, and that's really the gift that I try to give people now. Thank you. And you asked about my childhood traumas. There weren't many, to be honest. I had some abandonment trauma. My parents were both career people, but and I had a lot of illness as a child. I had migraines, I had stomach problems, I had really, really bad anxiety as a kid. But like, I was never, molested, beaten, left to die, anything like that. And the fascinating thing is it just goes to show you that your traumas can be very, very severe or they can be very kind of pedestrian, but pain is all relative and it can affect you in 1,001 ways, no matter the severity. Mhm. Yeah. And, when you meet the people who say, "Oh, yeah, like, I'm perfect," or "I don't really think I have any issues," or something like that, it always gives me a little bit of anxiety because I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop with this person. Like, they have very little self-awareness to, you know, not to be able to say, like, what their issues are, that they think they don't have any, and that's I've heard that many times, and it always, like, throws a little alarm bell in my mind. I'm like, "Wait, okay." You especially never wanna date someone who says, "I don't have any problems." That's Sure. Oh, right, right. Oh, right. I digressed, sorry. Mhm. Yeah. The way that I did it, I'm gonna try to be as practical as possible because I could tell you, like Yeah, exactly, and I'll just be as straightforward as I can. So, first of all Yeah, yeah, so, first and foremost, uh, I got help from therapists and coaches and mentors, and I had a support system. We're not meant to do these things alone or in a vacuum, and that's extremely important. If anybody's Yeah, I had my family and my friends, but I was pretty stubborn about letting people in, which is something I regret. I wish I had included more people in the process of being there for me. Um, you know, but but it was just the way I was at the time. Kind of proud and sort of in denial. But I was realistic enough to know that like I needed to talk to my mental health professionals and my doctors and my mentors. So I let them in, you know? Um, Secondly, I learned meditation and I started meditating every day, twice a day. That healed like at least 50% of my anxiety and depression. I use something called Vedic meditation. Yeah, it's VEDIC if anyone wants to look into it. It's fairly similar to transcendental meditation, which is a larger branch. Okay, awesome. So I meditated every day and I still do. Uh, Third, I looked at which ones of my behaviors on a daily basis were helping me and which ones were hurting me. So, hanging out with people who made me feel low and who didn't have a lot of ambition or who didn't, inspire me, that was hurting me. So I started distancing myself from those people. Going to the gym every day. Yes, it was a very conscious decision because again, it wasn't about like, what am I going to do with my friendships? It was a calculation of which behaviors are helping and which behaviors are hurting. So, like exercising every day, that was a behavior that was helping, so I kept it. The way that I ate was a behavior that was hurting, so I changed it. I went to different, nutrition specialists and people who do like allergy tests and um, acupuncturists and stuff like that, and I found out like which foods were hurting my gut and making my oh, you do that. Okay, awesome. Oh, wow, wow. Mm, now it's like all the rage. Yeah. Yeah, so I started learning. Absolutely does. Wow. You were a real pioneer. Yeah, thank you. So I started getting educated on all of that gut stuff because I got ulcerative colitis. Uh, that was the disease that spiraled this whole thing out of control. I started doing a lot of research about the medications I was taking and which of them were helping and which could be hurting. You know, I looked into holistic medicine, so it was all it was obviously in combination with medication and therapy, but the rest of my transformation, the how, was very action based. It was very much like, how do you mitigate your anxiety on a daily basis? What do you Who do you hang out with? What do you put in your body? Are you doing your little tasks on your to-do list every day? What time do you sleep? What time do you wake up? Are you following a routine? None of these things, Dr. Randall, are rocket science. There's no secrets. There's no like holistic, eat turmeric and all of your problems will go away, although turmeric is helpful. It's stuff everybody knows that nobody wants to do because it's annoying and rote and requires a lot of discipline. But if you do it, you have an extraordinary life and you're extremely happy. Oh, I stopped drinking alcohol. I haven't had a sip of alcohol in like 10 years. Just like little things like that. Over and over and over again. Yeah. 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 The book that changed my life was um, "When the Body Says No" by Gabor Mate. Um, and before that, of course, there was "The Body Keeps the Score." Um, so, those are 2 books that explain what you're talking about, which is how uh, physical ailments and diseases, including many types of cancers, are physical manifestations of emotional injury that has been suppressed. And if you can address the emotional injury in addition to treating it physically with Western medicine, then the problem, almost goes away. It gets, oh, yes, yes, of course. Mm. What if the illness, God forbid, takes your life? Like, my uncle recently passed after a very, very difficult 6-year battle with cancer. Mhm, mm, hmm. What was your experience? Okay. I was just curious because that's a great story. It just spreads everywhere. Mm, 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 mhm, mm. Wow. Right. Mm. It's beautiful that you were able to find that. I often say that if a person's path in life is harder, it's because their calling in life is higher. So, every one of these experiences that we have is a gift in that it raises our calling and it raises our awareness and it raises our understanding, our resilience, our healing. Yeah, it was a great. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of it's kind of a catch 22. Like, on the one hand, did I ask for a lot of the things that happened to me? No. Was it fun? No. Um, but on the other hand, would I have had the career that I have now without it? Absolutely not. Now I'm living my life's purpose, and I'm happy and I'm healthy and it's fulfilling and I'm helping other people. I'm the luckiest person on earth. But yeah, us together. So it's hard to, yeah, it's hard to be resentful of painful, tragic experiences you've had in your life when they've brought you, many, many gifts, on the other side. Right. Mhm. Yes. Mhm. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I meet a lot of people and I have clients right now who are the most loving, affectionate, outwardly kind and generous people with their friends and family members and everything. But then when it comes to the way they treat themselves like an adversary. And it's Mhm. Mm. Mhm. You give yourself a 0. Yeah. Yeah. One of my, rules is talk to yourself the way you'd talk to your best friend. Not, you know, not treat yourself the way you want others to treat you, or, treat others the way you want to be treated or whatever, but use the language toward yourself that you would use toward your best friend or your sister or your mom or whatever. Um, Sure. So I'm a big believer that our subconscious mind listens to every single word that we say and records the things that we say, and then, recreates that like a feedback loop in our reality. We we are not very conscientious of the language that we use, and if we make a mistake, we might say, "I'm such an idiot," or "I always f it up," or, "I can't figure out what's wrong with me," or whatever. I don't even like to say these words as an example right now because, I don't like to use that language about myself because I know that it's powerful. But if your friend, made a mistake, got a flat tire, or, did something stupid in her love life or something like that, the last thing you would say to him or her is, "You are such an idiot. What is so wrong with you?" If that's somebody that you really cared about. So whatever words you would use to console that person, even if it's sort of harsh, you have to use the same language to yourself. Let's say they did make a mistake. The language you'd use with your best friend is probably something along the lines of, "Hey, look, was this the wisest decision you could have made? No, but you have options. There are ways to clean it up. Now you know not to do it again." And dwelling and calling yourself names is only going to make the problem worse. So it's okay. You're a human. Give yourself a little bit of love. Don't do it again. And that's the best that you can do, right? If we can use the same language and the same sentiments with our best friend as with ourselves, then we're having a much more accurate conversation with ourselves. Usually, the conversation we have with ourselves is not only denigrating, but also just very lopsided. It's very inaccurate. It does not paint a clear picture of what's going on. Therefore, it makes the problem much worse. Does that make sense? On a particular subject? Okay, so right. Yeah, so what Kevin would say to Kevin is similar to the example I just gave. I would say to my sure. I would say, "Kevin, if I made a mistake and it was my fault, like it was clearly on me," I would say, "Kevin, was this the wisest decision you could have made? No. Did you have information available to you that could have prevented this from happening? Yes. But the fact is that you made this mistake. It won't be the first, it won't be the last. There are ways to correct it, there are ways to make up for it, and it is okay. And it has to be okay. That's the only option. The only option is for it to be okay. Because no matter how long you spend beating yourself up, the result is not going to go away. Let's see what we can do to mitigate this. And you know what? I love you. Next time, you're going to do better. I'm proud of you. You make one mistake a day, you make 300 wise decisions a day. Your functioning is pretty damn good. Your track record has been pretty good. That's the kind of thing I would say to myself. What was it? Oh, mm. You gave her too much fentanyl? Mm, mhm, of course. Yeah. Yeah, the "I'm sorry" thing is huge, I'm a fan of "I'm sorries" to other people, and I'm a fan of "I'm sorries" to myself, because it's an acknowledgement, you know? And an apology. Yeah, and An apology can go a long way if it's really genuine and if it shows remorse. I'm always surprised by how how often people mess up and and how rarely they're willing to humble themselves enough to apologize. Like, people are terrible at apologizing. I don't know if we're not taught or if it doesn't come naturally or if it's our ego or pride or, whatever, but you know what? I used to have this problem too. When I was younger, like in my teens and in my 20s, I was very self-righteous, and somehow I thought that, apologizing gives over some power, uh, something stupid like that. But now that I have much more humility, um, I understand the power of an apology, and I know. Right. Yeah, it also allows you to respect yourself a little bit more, and it allows the other person to respect you a little bit more. Um, which I think, yeah, and, you know, this is slightly tangential, but I am of the belief that we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to increase our confidence and our self-esteem, but we don't actually need those things if we have self-respect. And self-respect is really where we need to be focused on, really what we need to be focused. I don't think they're the same. I think that they're similar and they're correlated, of course, but I think that um, self-respect is a little bit deeper, and I think that confidence, at is much more ephemeral. For example, you could be really confident about your job, like, "I'm an extraordinary software engineer," but then not confident at all about your looks or your love life. But being a self-respecting person means that even if you're not confident about your looks or your love life, you still don't do things to respect yourself or make your life worse. So, self-respect is not really something you have as much as it is something you do, right? The way that we know how much we respect ourselves is by looking at our daily behaviors, looking at our actions, looking at, the lives that we've created. Confidence will come and go, and your self-esteem will also come and go, based on things that you've been through in your life, but your self-respect is a more predictable and reliable indicator of how you feel about yourself, because it ultimately comes down to how you're treating yourself on a daily basis. Right. What you be. Yes, because your habits become your character. Exactly. No, I understand. It's like it's one thing to do a kind act, it's another thing to be a kind person. Um, but my philosophy is that your habits become your character. So if you're doing kind acts 3 or 4 times a day, every day for several years, then you have developed a kind character, you know? And if you're doing self-respecting things over and over again, then you eventually develop high self-worth and a feeling of respect toward yourself. Because we don't build our self-respect or our self-esteem, through, okay, I got this really hot girl or I got this raise at work or whatever. We build it through respectable behavior. We build self-esteem through esteemable actions. And that can include getting a raise at work, but it's more likely doing a really good job at work every day for a long period of time, so that when you go home at night and you put your head down on the pillow, you know you did your best. That's gonna be much more fulfilling than, "Today I got a great raise, that must mean I'm, good at what I do." So, it's really for me, it's all about the consistency of small actions over time that make our lives 1% better every single day. I'm sure I do. Yeah. Any particular subject or point you wanted to hit on? I shared something on my Instagram today, which has been very, very powerful in my life recently. Um, which is that, did you ever have to write a thesis paper in high school? Okay, right. So basically, what they make us do in those papers is they have us start with the thesis, which is a convincing statement. I s- don't. I didn't mean to have you date yourself. Spring chicken. Yeah, good, good. So they used to have us um, start with a thesis statement, start with a convincing, arguable assertion, um, and then throughout the body of the paper, you have to find a whole bunch of evidence to support and bolster. Yeah, and that is exactly the way that our brains work. We start with a statement. And then as we go throughout our day, we cherry pick bits and pieces of evidence that support that statement, and we ignore bits and pieces of evidence that would refute that statement. So, for example, if I believe dating in Los Angeles is really hard, especially for someone in their 30s, for example, something I hear all the time, right? I'm starting with that statement. Does that statement have some truth to it? Sure. But let's say that's my assertion. Every date that I go on is gonna be very difficult. I'm gonna find all of the challenges that, you know, people in their 30s who are dating in LA run into. And my dating life is going to be a mess because I've started with the statement that dating is really hard, and then I found all sorts of ways to support it. But if I started with a different statement, such as, yeah, dating in LA can kind of suck, but everybody, people find their partners all the time. And I know dozens and dozens of people who are very happily together. That's the statement that I'm starting with. Then my brain is going to do the same thing. It's going to cherry pick bits and pieces of evidence to support that. So I guess the pearl here would be examine the statements that you're starting with, and the ones that are not serving you, you need to change, because as soon as you insert a statement into your mind, Your mind is going to do the rest automatically and start finding all of the evidence that supports it. So you've got to be really careful and very selective about what your starting principles are. Mhm. Mm. Exactly. 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 You're absolutely right, Dr. Randall. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. I'm here. Oh, right, right, right. You can find me on Instagram. It's my name, Kevin Nehai. My YouTube channel is my name, Kevin Nehai, and my website is Kevin. Yeah, yeah, and my website is just my name, kevinnahai.com. Please reach out to me on any of those platforms. You'll find videos, you'll find content, you'll find information about me, you'll find links to my upcoming talks, um, articles that I write. I put out a lot of free content on Instagram and YouTube. Um, so you know, if if you're interested in working with me, of course, reach out. But if you just want to get a sense of my areas of expertise and stuff, you can comb through my stuff on the web. Both. Yeah. So I speak at businesses, schools, conferences, synagogues, churches. I speak at all kinds of places on various subjects, everything related to the mind, the body, the spirit, healing, trauma, improving our lives, personal development, etc. And then my private practice, I work with men and women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s on their body image, their dating lives, anxiety, depression, their habits, all manner of things that we've discussed in this topic. So if anything I said resonates with you, please reach out. Thank you.